You are shaped by the people who raise you, by your environment, and the people who love you dearly try to impart as much knowledge to you as they can. And sometimes they don't get everything right because the world is constantly changing. And I think that my parents wanted me to believe that if I had a very squeaky clean image, and I studied hard, worked hard, and led a very conservative lifestyle, or at least one that was that stayed on track, that everything I wanted would come to me very easily. Meaning I would, if I get the good grades, I'm on the right path. My career goals will be easy to attain. It'll be a cinch, well, almost not a cinch, but I'll definitely be on the right track. And I will probably get married and have X number of children and live happily ever after. But the world changed. And quite rapidly and dramatically. And it wasn't that easy to attain the kind of career that you had hoped to have, that you imagined you'd have when you were a child, that you would meet the kinds of people that you thought you'd meet, that everything was awaiting you. You just had to be there. And you know, for some people, they're very lucky, they're very successful, and everything falls into place. Most everything falls into their laps. I didn't have it that easy. It was quite in some cases, an uphill battle. Things didn't always fall into my lap. Sometimes they didn't fall in my lap at all. And I had to, strive for something else or work through that and make the best of my situation and persevere. And I think what I would tell a young person today is, it's great to have dreams, it's great to have goals, but always remember that things may not go as you planned them to go. And it's not your fault necessarily, it's not a strike against you. It's just a way of trying to cope with the changes that are thrown at us. And you'll be a happier person if you just say, well, okay, I'm going to get up, I'm going to brush the dust off me, and I'm going to try again. If this isn't going to work, then I'm going to look for something else, but I'm never going to put myself down, and I'm never going to give up. There is a saying, though, that nice guys finish last, and that's not a new saying, but that's from way beyond our time, and it's true. You could be the A student, the person who holds the door open for everyone. Not that you shouldn't do that, you should. The person who doesn't think of putting him or herself in front of everyone else's needs, and then ends up just behind the 8 ball. It's sad, but it is true. It has happened that people who've taken shortcuts have managed to get on top. And it's a fact of life, and what we have to do is just try to be our own cheerleader and say, okay, you know what, I can't be like the other person. It's not in my personality to cheat, to lie, to scam, so I'm going to try to get ahead too. I'm going to try to learn the rules of the game, but I'm not going to compromise my values for that. I'm going to do what I was taught to do, to be the very best person I can be. And that means not forgetting about the next person, not being kind, not being trustworthy. I don't have to be a vessel of hate. I can be the person I am. I'm just going to play a little bit harder, but I'm somehow or other I'm going to get where I want to. But I'm not going to do it with a history of misdemeanors. It's hard if you don't have close family who support you emotionally and professionally. You have to look to other people. Perhaps it's a neighbor. Maybe it is a friend of a friend, or it's another relative. Maybe it's an aunt or an uncle, or a sibling. Parents are the greatest foundation of can be the greatest foundation of our life. I mean, there are people who've had, unfortunately, abusive parents, bad family lives, broken homes. But if you have a parent or parents who love you and support you as much as they can, and not just financially, but emotionally and otherwise, then you're off to a pretty good start, because it all starts at home. And I've known people, regardless of wealth, I've known people who had great wealth and opportunity who had miserable childhoods because they were products of divorce, and they were pawns in the parents' divorce. Neither parent would take them. And they ended up going off to boarding school or some other place. They were shunted from one place to another, or one family member to another, and they missed the depth and the warmth of a real upbringing with stability. And later on in life, they found that it came to haunt them. So much so that when they were entering into their own marriages, they found a lot of psychological discrepancies or ghosts from the past that were sabotaging their relationships with others and with their own children. And even with the passage of many decades, they still could not overcome what had happened to them as a result of their parents' divorce. You know, why couldn't they grow up with the mother and the new husband? Why couldn't the father win custody of them? Why couldn't they live have a nice home life? Know they could go home to somebody, that there's a mother and a father waiting for them to love them. Why is it they have to go in loco parentis to a school and look to the school to give them some kind of upbringing? And it doesn't matter how much opportunity, how much money, privilege they had. Saying, "Oh, I went to the greatest boarding school in the world, and thank God for that." No, it's not. It's nice to have the educational opportunities. It's also nice to have the family. Well, all that glitters is not gold, and yes, celebrities like Bill Cosby were giving off an image of, I'm just a wonderful person on and off the screen. I'm Dr. Huxtable. I'm him off and on the screen. That's the way I am with my family. I have, X number of kids. We have a wonderful life. We have family values, and all my children have grown up to be good human beings who care about others, and we have fun doing it. And yes, they have privileges, but we keep family values intact. But little did we know that for Bill Cosby, the truth was farther from the reality, as we've seen in his court battles. He seemed to have led a double life, and I wonder how his wife of so many years could actually bear this. She must have known something was going on. I find it very hard to believe that she had no idea what her husband was up to. And it must be very painful for the surviving children. He had lost a son, tragically, who happened to be a Columbia Teachers College grad, who lost his life on the road, who would have been a wonderful educator, and I just wonder how his children feel about it. The persona they give to the public in light of the sentencing may not be what really is transpiring behind doors, and I'm sure they feel hurt and betrayed by what their father has done. And it's very sad, but many people in power, positions of power, and it's not just political power, it can be financial, social, entertainment, feel that they can get away with a lot of things, and that no one is going to know, and that they are somehow above the law, or they are above our expectations of what it means to be an upstanding citizen. The Me Too movement, it was a long time in coming, because women who remembered when there was no such thing as accountability, when they went for interviews, and not just in Hollywood, elsewhere, and they were at the mercy of their male interviewers or employers who felt they could just have their way with them, and there was no one to go to. You couldn't say, "Okay, I'm filing a complaint against you in human resources. I'm going to my attorney." It was unheard of. You just couldn't. I mean, a few people who didn't always have positive outcomes. And now I think it's made it clear that no one should be toyed with, that we all have our personal space, and we are human beings who are not to be trifled with. We are not to be abused or used, and we are fully respectable human beings, and that's a very important movement. in our society. And we've seen on television shows what the pre-Me Too movement looked like. Mad Men, for example, which was a wonderful show on AMC, a wonderful period show. It was excellent. It was the acting, the situations. It showed you what the 60s really were like. And to some of us, oh, it sounds so wonderful and nostalgic, and wow, it must have been a simpler time. And, you know, but it was rife with assassinations and political upheaval, and the women's movement was just beginning. It hadn't even given birth to itself yet. But there was no such thing as Me Too. If you were a woman abused or raped by your male counterparts at work, or if you had an out-of-wedlock baby because somebody, date raped you, for example, you didn't have many places to turn. Your family would be ashamed of you. You might have to give up the child. You might lose your job. But the man just, well, he had nothing to worry about. It didn't affect him at all. So it's a different world today, and it's made it acceptable for all kinds of situations. There are many single women who are mothers. In 50, 60 years ago, they would be looked upon with shame. Today we see alternate lifestyles. People don't gasp in horror when they see two men holding hands, two women holding hands. We know about all kinds of families, two parents, two women parents, enrolling their children in public school and private school, two daddies, two mommies. I mean, it's almost as if anything goes. It's fine. Whatever situation you want is yours to have, and you're an equal member of society. But on the other side of the token, there is a lot of, I feel, bitterness toward people who just won't accept every kind of lifestyle. For example, not everybody embraces the commercialism of the LGBT community, and they have rights. They fought for their rights in the Stonewall riots of 1969, but many people just feel that it's entering our political atmosphere. It's entering our commercial sphere. I mean, maybe if we wear a rainbow shirt, does that mean that we're automatically endorsing LGBT lifestyles? Can't we just wear a rainbow shirt? Can't a child just wear a rainbow shirt just because she likes the rainbow colors? Oh, well, when you first come out of school, when you get your first teaching job, you're fresh out of graduate school or whatever, college, and you come with a set of ideas that have been instilled in you in graduate school, and they're basically theoretical, and you try them out with classes. Sometimes they don't work because the kids are at different levels of functioning, and in most public schools, you have just a disproportionate number of kids who really are either special needs learners or below grade level. Very rarely do you get a homogeneous group of kids. So what you basically have to say to yourself, and without insulting your professors as well, I got to put that aside. I'm going to throw that out the window. The stuff that was taught to me in grad school is not working here, evidently. I've got to change my whole plan, because my other plan is out the window. It's in a perfect world, it might work, but not in a real classroom. And that's not to say that your first job might be in a class of very gifted learners, in which case, yes, some of the theoretics that you studied in graduate school could be applied there, but most of the time you have to, you have to think on your feet, and you have to adjust to your audience. And if your audience has disparate learning needs, then you have to go accordingly. You can't just rely on what was taught to you. And there used to be saying that, well, new doctors who don't have experience, when they are presented with a case and they're trying to explain to the patient what the diagnosis is, very often they will quote what they learned in medical school. And the joke is, well, you know what, he's just quoting me what's in a book. He doesn't know what's wrong with me, and I'm not listening to him, I'm going to somebody else. So you have to you have to learn to think on your feet, and you have to work with your audience, just as I guess an actor, an actress, a comedian, has to see how it has to ascertain the audience. Well, what's the audience like? It has to feel out the audience. Well, your classroom is your audience, and you have to see, how do I engage them? How am I going to get them to respond to me? What if it's a second language learner? How do I, all these things that I want to do with you know, graphing, scaffolding, it's not going to work with them. There must be another way I can reach them. So yes, sometimes what you're taught in school is theoretical, and it has to be, it can't automatically be diffused among so many people. You have to adapt to your environment, basically, if you want to survive. You know, life happens when you're making plans. Have a backup plan. Be realistic about what you can accomplish. It's wonderful to dream, and sometimes dreams are what lift us up when we're down. But you know, think about it. Is it really within the realm of possibility? What if it doesn't happen? What is your next step? What can you do? What else is out there for you? If you don't reach your goal at this time, is it really the end for you? Can't you plan for something else? Think about what is possible, what's humanly possible for you. Do you really want to pursue this course of action? Do you really want to be this or that? And try to take things with a more mature look, and don't try to compete with other people. It's not healthy for you to compete with other people. Life is a competition in many ways, but when you're dealing with yourself, you don't want to measure yourself against someone else. Everybody gets to point B or to the finish line when he or she is ready to. We are not in the same, we don't exist together. We exist for ourselves. What works for you may not work for him or her. So, you know, if your friend gets married at 21, well, that's nice. That doesn't mean that it's good or bad for you. It doesn't mean it's going to happen for you, and it doesn't mean that if you have to measure yourself by that, you have to use that benchmark for yourself. Otherwise, you're going to be very disappointed in yourself. You have to, you know, wish others well and say, well, you know what, my time will come, and I'm working on other things at the moment. And I think that's what I think a lot of young people today are for the most part, because they are of a different generation and they're brought up in this technological society, I think they're more aware of these things. So if they're pursuing a career that may not be panning out, they'll try something else. I mean, some of them will say, well, you know what, it's the so-and-so's fault and the government's fault and whatever. But I think they know what they want to do, and they can take the bull by the horns, and they're not afraid to forge their own path. Well, there are many variables to making a successful person. I think it starts at home, or at least with people who are behind you, although we hear many stories about people who've made it on their own, didn't have the parents, the family, the money, the education, and they were able to find a way to accomplish their goals. It's very hard, but if you have a supportive family, supportive friends, relatives who say, well, you know, you should study such and such, you should go ahead and follow your heart. This is the path you're meant to be on. I think you have a good head start. I think if you can go at it with confidence and know, okay, I'm going to fail sometimes. Everybody fails. There's no such thing as a person not having a bad day. You know, some people will say to you, I've never had a bad day. I've always been successful. I don't think so. We've all, you know, if not now, you're going to find one down the road somewhere. You have to keep your head on your shoulders and say, okay, I'm good enough. I made a mistake, or okay, I didn't get the grade I wanted. I'm still going to work at this. And it does help to have the support behind you, the parents who are saying, yeah, go ahead and do it. Yeah, you can do this. You know, follow your dreams. Don't worry if so-and-so did this and flew around the world, or you know, made it to Antarctica and back, and that may not be, that's wonderful for her or him, but for you've got to worry about what's good for you. What is going to make you happy? Where are you going to find this North Star? And I think people lose sight of these things when they have very high expectations of themselves, and the expectations fall short of what they want them to be. So for example, if you always wanted to be a an actress, and it's a very competitive world. There's a lot of rejection in acting, and yes, you see a lot of young people who've made it on television or in the movies, and they go from one project to another. It's very hard. I mean, do you have the time and energy to invest in that? You know, can you make that your full-time proposition, or are you going to have to supplement your income? And if so, if you can't do it, if it's too much, what other ways what can you do to make yourself satisfied that you're doing something that you find rewarding? Because it's really all about, at the end of the day, saying, you know what, I tried this, but I found something even better. I found another outlet in which I can entertain my passions. I don't have to give them up entirely and just put myself into a corporate job. There are other ways I can do it. And I think the way we handle rejection, the way our culture, our families raise us to handle it, the way they rationalize it is very important. If your parents say, look, you know what, you tried, and that's what's good. The fact that you tried and you're here and you're going to try again because you know you're good and you don't give up. As opposed to parents saying, well, you see your failure at that, what are you going to do now? You know, that's not good. It's not good for the ego. It's not good for self-esteem. And that's really what successful people have. They can say, well, my parents thought I was wonderful. My parents thought I was this. And when things were down and I didn't think I'd ever get up, they showed me a way, and they said, don't worry, don't despair, it's going to happen to you. And I think that's very important. You really need to believe in yourself, and a lot of it does come from the people around you. Yeah, well, unfortunately, it is still a man's world. Even though women have made a lot of strides professionally, socially, but it's still a man's world. Men do make more than women, even in the top echelons of corporate America. They're promoted more frequently. There are, I think, still more male CEOs than female. But we're seeing, I think, where the glass ceiling is cracking in the political realm. We've seen more and more women who are running for high office. But as far as marital situations go, yes, it's hard to get married. And there are men who will say, yeah, I can't seem to find anyone who's right for me. It's just very hard. We have all kinds of barriers that society puts up, that our own people put up, our culture puts up. It's just very hard to get by. I mean, everybody comes of age with a picture of the person with whom they want to spend the rest of their lives. Oh, he has to have this education, that education, he looks this way or she looks that way, and we're going to live here and have 2.5 children, and we're all going to be happily ever after. And sometimes when you have to try to adjust your picture and say, well, you know what, I'll take someone who may have been married already and has a child. Maybe this is a good person who, had an unfortunate first marriage. Perhaps the person who's right for me doesn't live near me. Maybe I'll have to move out of town to start a life with him. Maybe I'll have to share, we'll have to share in certain responsibilities. If he wants to, live out on a farm, I'll move out to a farm with him. So, a lot of it is personal, it's subjective, but it's also the society in which we live in. I mean, in our parents' time, it was, I think, a much simpler society. Cost of living is very high. People's lifestyles are so different. They're so strange from what our parents knew, that many parents just couldn't understand, well, what is the problem? Why can't she find someone? What are these men looking for? And, and vice versa. What are the women looking for? Maybe you should consider someone who's been divorced. Maybe you should consider someone who is in a field that you'd never imagine you would be associating with. Maybe it's not. Maybe you're not going to marry a doctor. Does he have to be a doctor? Can he be someone else who is a fine, decent, upstanding individual? So it's just hard. It's very hard. And women are still, even though there are a lot of single mothers out there, there are many women who choose not to get married and are very successful. are wealthy, are CEOs in their own right, actresses, politicians. People still wonder, well, was she ever married? Does she have any children? What does she know about kids? She never raised one. Whereas a man, it still casts a dubious light on him, because they'll say, was he gay? So to some suspicion. But in any event, it is still a man's world in many ways. First of all, I think we need to eliminate this hatred, this sentiment of hatred that's in the air. It's putrid. You can't say anything that's contrary to what the majority is saying unless you want to open yourself up to attack. You see the sparring between networks on cable news networks such as Fox and MSNBC and CNN. You see the discussions, and people are sparring, real verbal, they're like jousting matches. I mean, you can't even get a word in, and sometimes the moderator has to cut him off and say, okay, well, we don't have time now. We have to go to a commercial break, and they're still talking over him. So I think this feeling of hatred that has descended upon our country has to stop. And I know this is happening because of recent political events, but as we go forward, are we going to have more of this? Are we going to be a divided nation? Some people have even said that we're at the point where we're close to having a civil war. And I don't know if we're going to have something like we had in 1860, but it's pretty bad. You have to watch what you say, what you wear. You just can't have a civil political discussion or anything, or have different ideas, have your own ideas in some cases, without incurring the wrath of people who think that they are very enlightened and that they speak for the majority. And I think the hatred just has to stop. And that's what I would do first of all. You're right, what I would do if I were president. Well, first of all, I would address everyone and say, okay, we've come through a brutal election season. Obviously, I'm the winner. It's now time to put down your guns, your spears, your knives. And please, let's come together and let's forge ahead. And let's try to get this country back on track, because we have a lot of serious problems. And throwing spitballs at each other, throwing mudslinging, having mudslinging contests, character assassinations, that's not going to help us at all. That's just a waste of time and energy. And then we would have to have some kind of coalescing of if it's even possible to work with both houses of Congress towards some problems, some very serious problems that we still have, that have been dragging on for many years. And in addition to climate change is a real and potent danger. We have a discrepancy in income. We still have a have and have not society. Let's address income equity among different professions, the healthcare situation. There are many different things that we have to address. And of course, our refugee crisis right now, it's not the fault of one party, it's the fault of many. It's all of our fault, and we have to actually sit down and say what we need to do, and also recognize that we can't let everybody in. Yes, we are the beacon of freedom, but why don't the countries who've thrown out these people, why don't they fix their problems? Why shouldn't they? Eventually we're going to come apart at the seams. How are we going to bear that burden? It's going to be a very difficult burden, not just for us, but for the people who want to come in. And many of them have very legitimate reasons for fleeing their country. I don't know if we can fix everyone's problems. I think these people, these other countries, these leaders, and they know who they are, why don't they fix what's going on, and instead of asking us for aid all the time? Now, I'm not saying that we should be isolationists. I don't think that's a pragmatic answer. And we know how that went back in World War II, just before World War II. But we have to put people on alert and say, as with NATO, We have supported NATO. NATO has been very important to us, and we have done a majority of the obligations. We have met the majority of obligations with NATO, and it's time to step back and have everybody else meet the obligations, whether it's NATO or it's the world economy. It's not just, we're not the only ones who are doing it, and we shouldn't be. Well, I think now that we have more awareness of special needs children, children who are on the autism spectrum, children who are of low IQ, low functioning, who have a myriad of learning disabilities, cognitive disabilities, and it's wonderful that we're living in the age in which we are, because years ago children like those were hidden, and there were very few educational opportunities. There was no hope, and the only place you could expect to send your child who had these problems was to an institution. And today there are schools that are dedicated specifically to the instruction of children with cognitive disabilities. And it's wonderful. The only problem is they're not accessible in every area. If your school district does not want to pay for it, your child may be in a program that is inappropriate for him or her, that stymies him. And that's the problem with our current special ed legislation. We have IEPs, we have legislation that says the most appropriate, doesn't mean the best education, it's just the most appropriate education. And if you don't like what your district is doing, if you feel your district is not providing enough of an appropriate education, if you feel the district could do better, in some cases parents have had to take the district to court, which is a lengthy battle. It can be expensive as well, and it's very heart-wrenching. I think we need to improve upon that. Also, there are agencies now, a proliferation of agencies that work for districts at no charge to the parent, or privately. And there's some wonderful agencies. We have a very wonderful agency called Long Island ABA that is helping Larry, that comes almost every day. And we're very fortunate that we found them. And we also live in New York State, and the insurance company does assume most of the responsibility for the cost of the home therapies. In some cases, I find that there are agencies, like in any business, that sees that it could be an easy profit, who take advantage of the situation and send people who just have no other reason but to make a living, to make money off the needs of someone who can't learn in a structured environment or can't learn in a regular school. And these may not be the very best people. And this child, in the end, suffers from the lack of cohesive instruction of services, of help, and doesn't progress. I think that state and local governments, and definitely national, our federal government should look into things like that, because people are, let's face it, people are getting ripped off. Because there are many agencies that should not even be licensed to provide services. They're falling on they're falling down on their responsibilities. They participate in petty political squabbles at the expense of the child. They enrage the parents. They antagonize the family. And I've lived through that firsthand, and I could name a number of them on each of my fingers. But it's not perfect. The situation for special needs children is much better than it ever was, but it needs to continue improving, continue getting better. And I think that as these children grow up, there has to be attention paid to what happens to them now. Some of them can't live at home, or if they can, they need medication. How do we? Everyone's insurance isn't the same. How do we make sure that these parents have access to doctors, to psychiatrists or behavioral specialists? And these children deserve to have as full a chance as anyone. They didn't come here asking to be like this, and many of them are just wonderful, and they're full of life, and they deserve to have every opportunity they can get. I think we can hope for accommodations throughout society for children who are autistic and because of overstimulation or sensory issues cannot sit in the same places as other children, cannot fly on airlines because it's too stimulating, too confining, and it might cause a very extreme reaction. I think more and more we will see accommodations made for children so that they can enjoy the same things as the rest of society. And maybe we will have answers to what causes it and what else we can do to ameliorate it. I don't know if there'll ever be a cure. I don't think they can cure it. That would be nice, but maybe we can just make these children feel that they are just as good as any other child, and they are important members of society, and there will be things for them to do with their lives other than being enclosed in a room and shielded from everyone.